Good afternoon to you, our dear esteemed viewers. Welcome back to this episode of the Youth Roundtable. My name is Douglas Drake, and today we're discussing the fragility of the East African community. But also we are putting into context a very controversial, but also a very interesting comment that was made by the President of Uganda, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, saying that the Indian Ocean is his, and of course he needs to have a say on it. But as well as we have a conversation around that, of course, this comes from a backdrop that the East African community was first founded in 1967 with founding countries in Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. But of course, it later on collapsed in the year 1977 and revived in the early 2000s. So joining me to discuss this very interesting conversation is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help us put perspective to the conversation, but also share their insights on the state of the East African community. Of course, we've been having conversations around integration, but it looks like the situation is tense and very fragile. And of course, it's imperative that as a young generation, the generation that is supposed to steer the ship of integration, to have a say on these matters. So in no particular order, allow me to introduce my guests. From my extreme left, I am joined by a gentleman who had been lost on the show, but we're very happy to have you once again, Mr. Godwin Bushanda. Very happy to have you here. Can you say hello to the viewers?
Thank you so much, our viewers. I'm happy once again to be on this show. It has been a while, but I'm happy to be here.
I'm very happy to have you to discuss this very interesting topic as well.
Thank you.
Yes, next to Masawe, the lady with a very interesting smile always when you're introducing her. She's Miss Apili Cynthia Esther. Very happy to have you here.
Thank you so much, Drake. It's a pleasure to be on, and I'm very excited to delve into this topic, considering the memes that have been going around.
The Indian Ocean is ours.
and she has been making one.
Interesting. Last but not least, we're joined by the industrialist, a lawyer by profession as well, by the names of Isaac Rugambwa, but I prefer to call him Prince H. As always, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Drake.
You're being very calm today.
I am always calm, unless the circumstances dictate otherwise.
Okay, the circumstances definitely is going to dictate. Allow me to begin with the lady. Before we started the show, we have been debating who should start. So allow me just start with you. It's imperative that we have this conversation, Cynthia. You know, as a generation and as young people, of course, born in the early 2000s and in the late 1990s, the late 20th century, the question of integration is something that our memory, what I would love to term as our popular memory, remembers the East African community as a conversation of the early 2000s. Yet its history is way beyond even 1967. It goes back to the colonial era that the white man was trying to introduce a federal state of East Africa, the federal state of East Africa, with the idea of promoting a multiracial state. That means with the existence of the white man in our lands, they wanted to promote, the objective was to promote multiracial relations, but also to promote the economic activity that they thought would be of great essence. The reason as to why I'm giving us this scanty but short history is to help lay base for us to start this conversation. And as we do so, it's important that you also help us give us a historical perspective and why that historical perspective is important to the conversation we're having today.
Thank you very much, Drake. So just to understand the historical perspective of the formation of the East African community, like you said, the conversation traces back to the construct of a federal state. And if you read through the history books, you realize it was a conversation from the missionaries, the likes of Alexander Mackay at the time. And the essence of this was a united East Africa was not just to unite these states, but also to maximize the efficiency. Because initially, Uganda was not supposed to be colonized. I think if we date back to the debates in the House of Commons in Britain at the time, the conversation was the state would invest a lot more in us than we would give back to Britain, and that would be a waste of taxpayers' money. And that's how we ended up in a form of indirect colonization. That's why we have a difference between Uganda and Kenya, for instance, where they had direct colonization and they have a huge influx of white settlers, and it's the same situation in Tanzania at the time of the German invasion of the country in itself. So I think just a conversation around that formation of an East African Federation, you could say also to a great extent laid ground for the East African community. Because of that nature of interconnectedness, you now have post-independent Uganda having the influence of the likes of Mwalimu Julius Nyerere playing a significant role in Obote II's return to power, but also just in terms of the help to East African countries gaining independence in general. And that now backs the essence of things like the Common Man's Protocol in 2010 that were largely meant to define how integration in East Africa would look like on an economic, political, and social level. And I think if you also pay attention to the conversation around the Indian Ocean Saga, we are trivializing it to make it look like a fight for boundaries, which is not the case. Because if you read through history, it's mainly about the territorial trade in itself, the access to the port in itself. And that's how you see things like the World Trade Organization agreements in terms of facilitating coastal trade and the like. So that history in itself is just the formation of the Federation of East African States, but having independent states and how they now choose to come together to form a common ground for trade, social perspectives, and just political growth in general.
Thank you. Isaac, from that backdrop, it's very important that we lay base for the new or the revived East African community. And the essence of integration, as Cynthia rightly put it, was one, to promote trade. But also we need to note that the Berlin Conference that happened in the late around the 1880s, thereabout. The scramble and partition for Africa that happened in that period in that period saw what we now today know as various African states. They drew artificially imaginary lines that defined us as Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, etc., etc. And on that background, that left us, or has left us today, grappling with a lot of issues that, of course, we see people talking about, oh, the Indian Ocean is ours, and without having context to why exactly this is a conversation that you see the president, even in his own statement, he was trying to show you that there is might in unity. There is always power in working together. He gives you examples of the US that has gone to the moon because they are together. He gives you the examples of France because they're in EU. I gives you examples of India that have also gone to the moon. And he says, you see countries like Britain, they're with us here on the ground. They have not gone to the moon. So, and his statement says, if we want to set up a strong army, you need to be strong on land, on sea, and in the space. But in Uganda, you can only set an army on land and space. Then he says, my Indian Ocean. Because for East Africa to be, one, economically strong, two, militarily strong, you need to have access to all those three avenues. But we shall get into all those nitty-gritties. The essence of the conversation that I'm interested in today is the revival of the East African community. We are alive to the fact that it died in 1977 during the reign of Amin, who had issues with the neighboring countries, Arab Moi in Kenya, and then in Uganda, in Tanzania, you had the likes of Julius Nyerere. Of course, they fell out. But later on, we see a revival in 2003. Legal background is very important because they iron out or lay down a foundation of how the East African community is supposed to be governed. The steps we're supposed to take, that in this period, we should have free access or free movements of people, labor, goods, etc., etc. Then there are like steps that ironed out, but of course on a background that comes from a legal setting. Let's pick it up from there. The legal underpinnings and where we are as a community today to have this conversation.
Thank you, Drake. That sounded like I was waiting for the question for a very long time. And I was starting to think whether you want me to deal with the Indian Ocean claim or...
You can as well give us your thoughts as well.
But the legal background, what East Africa is currently grappling with and what we have always grappled with is what is called legal pluralism and comparative private international law. And when you asked that question, I was taken back to my classes early this year in March. Very interesting classes. The whole idea of the East African community and currently federation, as I hope my colleagues will guide me if there's much a distinction, but the aim is the same,
Yeah.
um, is to at least have a block, like the way we see SADC, the way we see ECOWAS. They are not in their glorious days, but there is a sort of a harmony that they cast. And the East African side is always left in the shadows when it comes to that harmonized unity. I will not say that there is not much that we have realized from it. There is much that we have realized from it.
Yeah.
But the intended purpose, or where the drafters or the awakeners in 2003 looked at it being, is not where it is currently. And partly why we have that is, and I think maybe to speak into your question, is the problem of legal pluralism, that having Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, recently Somalia, then DR Congo, come onto one table and speak one legal language is a little bit challenging. And actually some scholars, you could read some of the works from Professor Kazoze, are arguing for a hybrid kind of system, that the fact that Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania are common based, it becomes a little bit hard for other countries to, to
But
come
should that really be a
onto-
problem? Because
onto board.
if, allow me to interject, should legal pluralism really be a problem? Because if the intent is for us to unite, the fact that you are you come from a common law background, you come from a different set of law background, should that be a problem?
When we approach that question from a common man's perspective, it shouldn't be a problem. But then when we come to the question of enforcement, it actually becomes a problem, because you're enforcing under what?
Yeah.
That is why some scholars are arguing for a hybrid system. But to come back to the conversation, the legality question of the harmonization of the East African community is alive through the East African Court of Justice, and there has been a plethora of cases that have been decided. Now, whether those cases have actually been enforced against or for these respective countries is a question now that comes back to how much each country is willing to put into, how much effort they're willing to put into this East African ideology to actually work out. And we see that with the latest, I don't want to even call it a claim. I don't want to, because it is not fit to be called a claim. It could be maybe an assertion, but it's far from a claim. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Godwin, Cynthia lays for us a very good case that, you see, the intention was already existent. It was even there before. But even the assumption that we need to think that before colonialism, I think we were already Uganda, we were Kenya, should also be debunked, because I think we were already united then, and there was a way of life that existed. It could not be something that we think as organized, but there was a way that we lived. There was no line, oh, this is this state is this state is that. But what later on we see upon the reorganization of powers, when the white man comes and colonizes our countries, is they confine us into these so-called states and countries, and then we are later on left grappling with questions of we must unite, or because now you have issues to do with power struggles here and there, and we are left with the situation in a scenario that we are in today. A statement that, of course, makes it's making young people laugh, but it's very important that we understand that this is an international relations question, but also a question of diplomacy, which I think informs this conversation. And as young people, it's very crucial and imperative that we have this conversation. What I'm interested now in the question, my question to you is going to be primarily premised on the idea of the possibility of first of all having a united East Africa. But even before we go into having a united East Africa, in your submissions, help us break down the possibility of, one, having a united East Africa, But we also make it broader. Let's widen the conversation, because this is just not a conversation of East Africa alone. It needs to also capture the aspect of the African Union. You're alive to the fact that the Organization for African Union, that's OAU, that was later on preceded by the African Union, laid a premise of the economic community for Africa that broke down layers of how we should integrate economically as a continent. From that background, like, you could go from East Africa to Africa, or Africa to East Africa, and then we see the possibility and then connect it to the saga that we're having at hand.
Oh, interesting. When you guys were speaking, I need to come with a pen and a book. I wrote so that maybe one day I publish a book about what happened actually. So anyway, before even African countries, or before even the white people came in, there's a way Africans organize it in terms of chiefdoms and kingdoms. The only thing that we didn't have, we Africans were not able to have their demarcations, say that maybe this is Uganda, this is Kenya, this is Tanzania. But of course, giving an example of Uganda, we had Buganda Kingdom, we had Bunyoro Kingdom, we had Ankwere Kingdom, we had the Toro Kingdom. Very many kingdoms and chiefdoms, like in northern Uganda, had a chiefdom. When you go to Tanzania, you had the Nyamwezi, you had all those chiefdoms and kingdoms. So, but again, within themselves, there was power struggle still. One kingdom invading the other because of resources, depending on how their minds were thinking about. And that's how the whole of Africa was organized. We were organizing chiefdoms and kingdoms. So in that disorganization, and the white people came to Africa, they saw what was in Africa, they got interested in minerals and everything. So the only way to tame with the Africans is telling Drake that, we can live on this table, you forget your Acholi, I forget my Ankore, but we call it Uganda. Why? They wanted to have a single administration of power, to avoid power struggles within themselves. So the issue was, don't take Ankore as Britain, and maybe Belgium takes Bunyoro. No, let's organize these kingdoms or chiefdoms and have a country. For example, that's why you see we have Maasai in Tanzania, we have Maasai in Kenya. But all these people share the same culture. We have a certain tribe around Karamoja side, which has the same thing with the Pokot of Kenya. That's why everything, and these tribes have consistently done what they were doing traditionally. Cattle rustling, all those things. When you go to, for example, to give you a context, have you ever gone to Ntungamo?
Yeah, I've been to Ntungamo.
Now, it is said, I know this man must be a historian. I heard he was speaking that language where it comes from. It is said that there's a time before the colonials came, Rwanda would stretch up to Ntungamo. And it is not Rwanda, it was a kingdom then. So, but when the white people came, they had to carve Rwanda to make it like small thing and then take Uganda. But again, what were they using to demarcate these borders? Physical features, not what we have in common. Like you put Kagera to separate Tanzania from Uganda. But you forget that you have the Banyambo who are already in Uganda and also others in Tanzania. So meaning you have disintegrated a Munyambo of Tanzania and a Munyambo of what? Of Uganda. We still have people who are staying in Karagwe in Tanzania, where I border, because I'm more common to that place. We have people who are shifting now, coming back. They are telling them now, you are Ugandans. They are coming back here. We have some MPs in that parliament whose ancestral checkups, they're in Karagwe, in Tanzania. But they are leading people in Uganda and they're MPs in that parliament. So it shows that there was a lot of disorganization for them, what they were interested in, their resources. Therefore,
allow me correct you. I think if you have the conversation around disorganized society, I would love to use the word, the white man found a system that was existent, yes. But what they do, they reorganize powers. And in them reorganizing those powers, you see how you made mention there was Buganda, there was this. They found an organized system that was existent. Now, in finding an organized system that was existent, they used the power that they feel had more grip to help them with administration. They go ahead and reorganize
Drake.
us. I'm giving my point of view.
Disorganization.
I'm giving my point of view. We shall have that debate.
No. Because now you really, disorganization doesn't mean that if you found us here on this show speaking, does it mean that we are organized?
Bushanda, are you alive to the fact that every conflict that we face in this African continent is always pinned back to ethnicity?
And which I agree.
So,
and I know where you're getting.
I
know where you're getting your suspicion from. But I'm going to have that question.
It's okay.
Now
please
you see, for you claim that they found us organized, which I agree to something that you organized, but organized in which direction? You know, sometimes you may find us in a single file. We are moving, but you don't know where you're stopping from.
So let's not connect it to what we're experiencing today. Is it because of our disorganization that we're still disorganized?
Yes, we are. Africans, we are. And I don't want...
Allow me hold you there.
First wait.
Yeah.
Drake, before you go to another thing.
I think...
I am someone who is against this debate. I have ever heard about it, debated like them, but again I changed my narrative. Where everything we say, whites. Because, for example, for how many years from the time of the Organization of Africa, how many elite people, how many scholars, how many prominent people has Africa had? Many of us. What have we done? But we are the same people we speak. From here you go to Brazil and you want to lobby because you think they are feeding your interest. You forgo Africa as a continent. Me, I no longer want that debate of saying whites. Let's discuss our issues.
I agree.
Let's discuss our issues.
I agree on that point.
Yes.
I agree
so
on
if
that
you want
point.
to
But the problem is,
pinpointing the whites, I may not be that debate.
Okay, let me just hold you there. I don't want to start debating because I'm just a moderator. But let me get to Cynthia. Cynthia, I'm grappling with this in my head, and I really want to argue, but I can't. On Sunday,
you can grapple with us. We are going to answer your question.
Yes. On Sunday, we had a conversation about the presumption about three things. The presumption, numerous literature presumes that there were three things that existed in Africa. One, they presume that, you see, the possibility of an organized society was something that was non-existent until colonialism came. That underpins your argument that we are disorganized. That is one presumption. Numerous literature shows so, right? The second thing, that the possibility of law and order in Africa was something that was non-existent until colonialism came. The third presumption is the idea that you see that colonialism ended. That colonialism ended too soon. That later on we see a proliferation of ethnic tension and conflict. That's another presumption that we have, that most literatures show that, you see, Africa before colonialism was like this. That one, we were a very disorganized society. That two, there was no law and order. That three, because colonialism ended too soon, we now therefore see a proliferation of, we see a rise in ethnic tensions and conflict. Cynthia, we both agree that the argument that politicization of ethnicity as a colonial tool is something that we need to debunk, because these legacies are up to today. It is true that the problem at this point, we shouldn't be saying white man this. The problem now lies down to our ignorance as a generation and as Black people, because we lack the information.
Ignorant elites.
Not only elites, generally everyone is ignorant. Now, my interest to engage in this conversation, to help maybe shed light to this conversation about integration, stems from those three presumptions. And I want us to debunk them and relate it to why we're grappling still with questions of integration, which is underpinned to ethnicity.
Thank you very much, Drake. I want to start off by responding to something the gentleman on my right said about the legal framework of these countries and how it's very different. For instance, you have Uganda operating under common law, and how that legal pluralism in itself affects the capacity for these countries to integrate and have a common stand. I don't think that is necessarily true. Because if you go to the ECOWAS region, Nigeria operates under common law, but on top of common law, they have Sharia law in independent states that are predominantly Muslim. I think that is in the north. I don't think it's the same legal framework that happens in, for example, Ghana. In Nigeria, you'd find that they have, I think, about 3 or 2 segments similar to Kenya of their parliament and how largely it operates. You have the senators and the like. If we've managed to have a draft of agreement such as the Common Man's Protocol in, I think that is 2010, the issue cannot be legality. We need to question the nature of ideologies that exist around, like the heads of state that represent us within the EAC and what, because I think
They
at
possess
the
the
fall,
political will.
exactly,
Yeah.
at the fall of the EAC in the Amin era, it wasn't a question of legality, it was a question of ideology. What did someone agree to and what did they not agree to? And I think that's the biggest challenge. I don't think it's informed by a legal stand, it's informed by a political stand. And the biggest question, or the biggest 2 questions that we usually fail to answer and resonate with, is when an incident is either a political question or a question of the law, which I think they need to intersect at a certain point. However, the political stand should inform the direction of the law in itself, because the political stand is the will of the people. Political ideologies are crafted off of necessity within society, and that's what informs the law in itself. Then, to answer your question, I will not buy the idea that African societies were disorganized. I don't think the existence of conflict becomes the predominant assumption to create what disorganization in itself looks like. Because if we want to say post-colonialism and within colonialism is when we formed a set of organization, we still had conflict. You can date back to, I think it was in 1875 where we had the religious wars in Buganda. You want to still date back to the rebellions that we constantly had existing, and this is within the colonial period itself. If you want to go to Nigeria, I think post-independence is when you now have the state of Biafra wanting to secede. If you want to go to Rwanda, post-independence is when you have the existence of the genocide in Rwanda. A lot of the major conflicts on the African continent are things that happened post-colonialism and not even back in the days. Because you had the Bunyoro Chitara invasion by the Luo back in the days before colonialism in itself. However, if you read through history and understand, the Luo people did not want to change the entire Bunyoro system. What they did is to conform to what existed within Bunyoro, and that's why you have majority of intermarriages. You may not even separate Masindi from Lira or Masindi from Gulu, because a lot of the people within those regions intermarried and they formed societies and communities and families. So I don't buy that reference to say we were not organized at the time, or we were largely disorganized. And if you look at the framework of British administration in itself, it was constructed off of what they felt was a more organized system, which was the Buganda Kingdom. So they borrowed a system and modified it, meaning there was a sense of organization that existed at the time. But if you allow narratives to supersede what our society was, that's the construct that is going to exist. And secondly, ethnicity in itself is identity. And I keep saying this because I remember in that debate, you were of the say, and I think I predominantly remember you saying the biggest theory that creates conflict is just the idea of transition. And for me, I said, no, transition is an important thing, especially to the Gen Zs, but identity is the foundation of conflict in itself. The passion you have to integrate is through identity. Do you identify with something? Do you recognize yourself in something? Because identity comes off of what I benefit from that society.
Yeah.
Does it define who I am? And that's the biggest challenge, because within, if you look at the legacy of colonialism, and I also don't buy the chart that we've blamed the colonialists enough. It's a lazy argumentation of elites. very lazy. Because if you look at colonial legacy in itself, post-colonialism, when we now gain independence, you still have the predominant influence of white people directing what your government should look like, directing what leadership should look like. If you look at the propaganda, because I say politics is propaganda, I'm a political science student, and that's the first thing you're literally going to be told in class. It's a lot of propaganda, and under that propaganda is underlying truth. If you look at the Bush War, the NRM Bush War, you would still find factors of influence from Korea, I think. And this is a conversation we were having with a lot of people, to say that if the premise of a revolution in itself is funded by white people, it means you don't have a sense of direction. You're going to prioritize the agenda of who finances that revolution in itself. The people of France, for them to have a stable government within post 1789 revolution, it was a predominantly French people revolution. Women said, no, we are not going to take this. The men joined in. Remember the march to Versailles, for instance. And how many historical references do you find of influence out of France? I think if you remember the American War of Independence that had France involved at the time of the rise of Napoleon Bonaparte, they pulled out.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. We need to start setting an agenda for Africans by agreeing. Because blaming colonialists is not just about saying you're responsible for this. No, it is recognition of what you are responsible for and identifying the direction of the mishaps you are taking us into, so we can walk away from that.
Let me just give you an example of a proper effect of colonialism in the way we exist today. The Uganda police, as we know it today, was founded in 1906. Then it was called the Police Armed Constabulary. If you, after the show, or even you, the viewers, go and check the primary objective of the police. The primary objective of the police for the colonial man was to do two things: quell riots and unrests. That was the primary role and objective.
And you'd ask yourself why that exists as a democratic right of the people.
The tool to control and assert dominance on the African people was a tool of colonialism. Yes? And that tool, of course, someone would say the tool of colonialism introduced guns in a stone fight. And that is what entirely it, because it politicized ethnicity, introduced guns in a stone fight. But now my interest, because if you look at the Uganda police today, what does it do? Because the police is meant to be, it's meant to be the bridge between the state and the citizens. What is the police doing today? The police is, of course, they teach you in SST that the police is supposed to promote law and order. Not so. In promoting law and order, what do? Quell riots and unrest. Still a colonial tool. Don't we then think we need to have a radical reimagining? Because if it's a bridge between the citizens and the people, shouldn't then be an armpit to promote justice? So back to the conversation
Drake,
of integration.
Drake,
I think it's also not very important.
Before you ask my brother, we need to be clear on this show.
Yeah.
As you bring the issue of police.
So just an example.
Yes, it's an example.
Yeah.
You know that kingdoms and chiefdoms in Africa had royal guards.
Yes.
Sure.
Right?
Yes.
And the royal guards, what they were doing then, in their own imagination of how they should work, it was between the subjects and the king, or the kingdom, or the palace.
Which is quite similar to
So it is, there is an, and this, by the time this, and I don't think that these Africans had maybe benchmarked in Europe.
Sure.
You get it? So the issue of police, there's no, whether I do what, because it is how man is created. You always need someone to keep you around for something. Let me give you an example. You go to, you remember when the incident happened in Kasese, when they arrested the royal guards and what? The royal guards were against the state, but protecting the palace. Their minds were, we need a state, we need a country within Uganda. So, in other words, police and the royal guards and what, they do the similar things. So, that's a setting of security, and you cannot change it. Unless you find to say that...
From your submission, do you therefore see that there was an organization that already existed?
You know, I want to answer my sister now. You bring in because she spoke for almost 15 minutes, and I know she's a lady. She stands that privilege.
Wow.
What I mean by disorganization, I don't mean that they found us without having anywhere to put our stand, but there is being disorganized in terms of ideology and what you're looking for. Like, for example, we might be here as young people. Oh, we might even go to school. But the fact that you graduate and even have a constant life, you don't know what exactly you're looking for. You disorganize it in your elitism. But the disorganization I was talking about is we organize in chiefdoms, but to what extent we organize it? The invasions were there. She gave an example of Luo invading what? Bunyoro Kitara. And what was the reason of them invading them? It shows that actually what they found is what their predetermined minds, they exactly found it in Africa. But now for them, they had a better version of quelling us. So we're quite disorganized.
Okay.
And I don't know what you call organization, but I might be disorganized in terms of, like, we can't be moving, but you don't have a direction.
No, I think that
What was the issue? If you ask
Bushanda,
Cynthia,
if I can,
and listen,
I would say,
let me ask you a question.
if your argument is on ideology,
Not-
you would need to establish what African societies needed in terms of an ideology that did not exist.
Listen to me. What was the issue of Luo invading Bunyoro?
You need to read your history because this is the thing.
brought it.
Let me say, I want to respond to the question.
Yes.
Yes. The response is simple. You cannot run away from the desire for dominance within societies. And that's what largely existed as an underpinning reason for the Luo evasion within
The issue
Bunyoro
of
Chitara.
dominance. You see, you mentioned very good history. And I keep in listening, but again, you again contradict.
No, so
Which
is it not
that's why I learn
dominance?
a lot from you.
Is it not dominance?
Listen to me. I want to be very clear. Luo invaded Bunyoro
Because
of the reason, because of they want to be dominant. That's not a reason. That's
Okay,
that's
what's
a
the
sharp
reason?
Okay.
Like, for example,
Allow me now control this debate.
please,
Allow me
please,
control this debate.
Let me
Let's
say
hold
this.
it there.
Let me say
Let's hold
this.
it there.
Because
Let me
if
mention
in
this.
history,
Yeah.
part
Let me
of the
mention
reason
this.
you have for colonialism, let me just answer this. If in history, part of the reason you have for colonialism within African states is the idea that these countries wanted prestige, they wanted to appear dominant. How does that shift? Because it's human nature within
No,
itself.
please, no.
How
Okay.
does that
And-
shift?
Allow me settle this debate.
I have
Just allow me settle this debate.
this helps us.
Okay.
Shapes
In
the-
a
Yeah,
second.
but-
It helps us. Let's make this clear. All of us are students of history in one way or the other.
Yeah.
Right? The whites, they came in a disguise of dominance, like you're claiming. But that's not their issue. Their issue was about resources. And we shouldn't discuss county debates here. The
But no one is
whole
denying
thing
that.
behind
No
the
one is
organization
denying that.
was resources.
That is
when
undisputed.
Exactly. We can't debate about that.
Which
It is not
resources
about
they
dominance.
discovered after coming.
Yes, which is okay.
Okay.
It's not like they
let's
had
now
high
hold this
knowledge
debate.
about it.
For Luo,
Bushanda.
for the
Bushanda.
Luo, I want to clear this on table.
Bro.
Me and Cynthia, we
Yeah.
need to be on the same page. For the invasion, Luo invading Bunyoro Kitara, it was not about the whole idea was not about dominance. The whole idea was about resources.
Which resources in
Okay.
particular?
Let me
Because
just settle
both
this
communities
debate.
are
Cynthia,
cattle-keeping
Godwin,
communities.
allow me
please.
settle this debate.
No, please.
Allow me settle this debate. When we're done having this show, just go and read the rationale behind state formations. The argument that is raised there is an issue of dominance. Before,
Literally.
yes, it's something that exists. You see, in societies
Drake.
no, I'm just giving an example. Something
Give
that
an
we all
example, but to a
Aha.
high standard
Let me
debate.
let
For
me show
example,
you.
you're going to
Let me
He
show
is
you.
right.
Let
He
me
is
show
right,
you.
Bushanda.
Let me
He
show
is
you.
Yes, we shall
right.
not end this.
Allow
We
me.
will not proceed. The moment you are called and you're debating, we agreed here, and you said it yourself. And even remember the show you had.
Yeah.
You were very categorical and you were very furious about this point.
Yeah.
The reason of state formation and everything, you said is dominance.
Yeah.
But what's behind dominance? We discussed that. Say what the point is.
True. Land. Let
Very
me
good.
give you.
Very good.
Let me show you.
Very good.
Allow me show you
Very
and
good.
allow me
Now,
engage.
we can proceed with the debate.
Allow me give you an example.
Yes, we can
No,
proceed.
yes. As I said, I want to settle this debate. You see, when you have state formation, let me give you an example. The state of Sudan, as we know it today. In the 1650s, before there was a state called, I think it was called Kushta, that had a capital city called Sina. Later on, we have Darfur. Yeah, Darfur wasn't. It was a community that had various kingdoms and chiefdoms. So when you have a society that has kingdoms and chiefdoms, before a state becomes a state, those individual kingdoms and chiefdoms will first exist as kingdoms and chiefdoms, not so? But there's always innate urge in us human beings to dominate the other. That is why you find the tribe, the tribe then, the nomadic tribes that later on the white man politicizes them in terms of nomads and non-nomads. You get. These later on emanates and then forms the Darfur state, which later on becomes Sudan. I can give you all the history behind, but the idea behind that was on the argument of land. But we shall not go to that. The idea, the argument that stands is dominance.
Actually,
Bushanda, allow me hold you there and bring in my brother.
The moment you mention what I want, I am okay. The debate is proceeding well.
All right, let's go to integration, because you see how this conversation becomes fiery. Because if right now we here even without power, we are already disagreeing. How about when we have power? Now let's put ourselves in the shoes.
And disagreeing is okay.
It's okay. It's very fine. Let's not put ourselves in the shoes of President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, Suluhu. Then you have Ruto. These are the grappling arguments that they could be possibly raising. And one Museveni says, our Indian Ocean.
He is right.
Yeah. Now, if we are grappling with this conversation to that extent,
are we?
We are actually. How serious is it? Because the question of integration is very important, and we need to decipher it further. Just give us your thoughts before we go into the break, my brother, because you've been so quiet. We've had the debate between Bushanda and Cynthia.
And thank you, dear viewers. I've been listening in quite intently, and there are a lot of issues that have been raised, which at a point I almost thought that the theme of the debate was a little bit different. But the issue of integration, like I had highlighted before, it is not far from realization. Yeah, I think in her rebuttal, she raised a point of identity, which underpins, I feel, is the basis of her submissions, which I partly might associate myself with. But you see, at the end of the day, I think even what he's trying to argue, which I might compel us to actually look into, is what lies beneath the shadow. Yeah. Yes, it is a question of identity, which is true, but what ends into that? Yeah. When the question of identity is not addressed, and you see, you cannot address that question in a sitting or in an agreement, or
so how do you address it?
It comes back down to there are things that we are going to agree on, yeah, and there are things that we are not going to agree on. When a Kenyan speaks Swahili and a Tanzanian speaks Swahili, a Tanzanian will tell you that is sham, and they are justified in their own way, because for them, it is what they see. So the question of identity crisis, it is never going to go away. But there are crucial things, and I think that is what the East African community focuses on. There are crucial things that unite us, yeah? Like, for example, cross-border trade, yeah? When these countries realize, actually, we need to work together. So they will drop whatever is the other side, and they will now unite onto that
aspect
one aspect. And I think we shall even delve into that when we are tackling the other part of the debate. So the question of identity, I wouldn't say it is the major whatever. Yes, it is there, but and we cannot do away with it. I mean, you're Drake, you're different from me. If I'm to identify myself with you, what unites us is male, but even our ideas might be far from, you know. The next thing I think I might comment about in regards to integration and the formation of these societies and whatever, what we are talking about here, what was Britain before it was Britain? I remember in one of the first very debates that I was here, and actually we're still debating the integration question. I highlighted the same fact, and I said, what happened when the Scandinavians and the Vikings attacked these scattered states is what, and wiping away the original Celtics, when you read Orientalism, is what these guys came and practiced here. They realized the darkness of living in tattered states. His argument is that we had our own organization. In whatever way it was us. You cannot take that away from us. If you did not come, we could still be maybe having our kingdoms, and we could still be okay. And the Waganda okay. They are okay. It's a very live example. When you look at the Batwa community, and they are okay. You might even go and build for them groups, and they will tell you we were comfortable in the bush. Yeah. So if we are going to discuss the question of organization, I think it comes back to his argument is that these guys don't come to organize us. They came specifically for resources. Their dominance and whatever is okay, but what was under that? Why are you discovering the source of the Nile?
But
dominate what?
But quick question. So if they came for
but
yeah, true. But quick question. Even when they came for the resources, 50, 60 years down the road, and we're still grappling with the same consequences of their existence in our lands today. And I think that's why we need to have also that conversation.
That I can say partly yes.
Not partly.
But you see why I say partly yes? Is because from 1962, when it was decided, or when we finally, I can say, got hold of our state, whatever we have done with that state is totally incumbent upon us. Right. Whatever our leaders, whatever direction they have steered us toward, it is entirely us. When you look at what Traore has been able to do with Burkina Faso currently,
let's not go to that
example. Wait. 5 seconds.
1, 2.
Let him first finish it. I want him to finish that statement. Yes, let him finish his statement.
Let me give. We have all participated in this internal politics of ours. Where does white man come? For example, I have been in an election, and very people have been in elections. You say, this is Muganda, don't vote for him. Really? You want me to go and say London? That debate, I left that debate.
I also really disassociate myself from that debate of blaming the white man. He did what he did, yes. It cannot be put off history books.
And that's why we're having this conversation, because we need to move past that. But how do we move past that? We need to understand all the surroundings.
You're asking a different question. Yes. If you're asking how we move on from that,
all right.
Different.
Sum up.
But in the submission, if I'm taking into Orientalism, in my submission, when I said the idea on blaming colonialists, I was pretty clear. Blaming them or attaching blame must include us identifying what the problem is, so we can walk away from it. You cannot blanketly say, you know what, I blame you for starting a tribal war, I'm going to walk away from it. Why is it in the first place that a tribal war exists?
Drake, did you participate in the NYC elections?
Not actively.
He was a fan.
You see, I was there. I was there from the word.
Please don't tell him what happened. Please. So for the betterment of the young people.
So you guys are arguing these things. Sometimes we have to sit back. We need to read history in its full context. Okay. What has been written is largely to orient us. I don't want us to take us now to
let's just go for a short break, guys. Let's just go for a short break. This conversation is very heated, and I think in the break we shall first have a short history lesson. See you in a bit.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create, and publish digital media, or to access and use computers, other electronic devices, and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from the break. Just before we went into the break, the conversation was heated. I really wanted to have that history session, but I was, of course, interfered with something that came up. Bushanda, you said we start with you. Let's start with you. Yeah. We are now on the question of integration. And having that statement from the fountain of honor doesn't just come from a backdrop of comedy. It comes from an informed point of view. That you see, for you to be strong, or for even you to sit on the table of men, you need to be united. There has to be a force that puts you people together. He cites for you examples of the United States. He cites for you examples of the EU through France. And he gives you an example. You see, Britain, they also failed to go to the moon because they are alone. Then he brings it back to East Africa and to Africa. We are divided. That's what he says. You have Uganda, you have Kenya, you have Rwanda, you have all the other states in East Africa. And because of our division, we have, of course, failed to, first of all, establish territorial strength. We have failed to establish economic strength. We have failed to establish, of course, when we look at territorial, you look at economic. What is the third one? Military strength. And that was his backdrop to informing that I need my Indian Ocean. He was saying in Uganda, you can have a strong army that is strong on land, strong in space. Space, I mean the air, but you do not have the sea or the ocean to have a navy. And the only way you can have a navy, because you have Uganda, which is landlocked, you have Rwanda landlocked, you have Burundi landlocked, you need to be united. And he says, I need my Indian Ocean. And you see Ugandans drawing unextended boundary lines. Of course, that is still
Does your
a
university
legacy.
have a campus on the Indian Ocean?
Of course,
They're the first to have it.
So, I don't want to go back to the debate we had in the first half, but you see that mindset of still drawing imaginary lines to show. But the question is, let's focus on integration. The possibility of us having a united East Africa, and how that statement has an effect to possibly triggering diplomatic relations between the states.
Wow. I will not go back to what you talked about.
Yeah.
I want to strictly go to the debate. I will start with resources. East African community having an integration or political federation, it is promising, but again, it's a hard thing to achieve. You know, something may be promising, but it's hard to achieve. The question is, when the president talks about Indian Ocean, and people come to rush to make narratives and there, for them, they will not know why Indian Ocean. We had the first time Ugandan troops went to Somalia. Almost all East African countries had refused to go there. And Uganda had gone into agreements with Kenya and Tanzania about the Indian Ocean, having access to the sea. And agreements would come in, go, come in, and everything would come out, and it would be a fail. And now the president or the country gets interested in Somalia. As Kenya hears that Uganda is almost reaching Kismayo port, Kenya now comes on board, goes to Kismayo, because it understood that the moment Uganda gets Kismayo, then Mombasa, Museveni will not have any discussion with Mombasa. Because the argument was, if Uganda gets Kismayo and it is in agreement with Somalia, I provide security to Somalia, I have perished all the Al-Shabaab. Therefore, it's an agreement. I have access to the sea. So, Kenya makes sure that it is only Kenya and all those countries near the sea to have access and exclude Uganda and the rest. So the question of the president is, for how long shall we go about this? So I don't want this discussion that I've been seeing people discussing about President Museveni. He's not here for a long time. But the question is, even if he's gone, he's no longer the president of this country. Is Godwin, Cynthia, and Rugambwa and Drake, are they seeing the reason as to we need Indian Ocean? If we cannot have that discussion as a generation, then we are most likely even we are most likely to have a decline in integration. We may even distort the whole process that the president has started with. Another example, there was an issue of the pipeline. At first, the discussion was between Uganda and Kenya. It did go on well. Now, Uganda gets interested with Tanzania. Magufuli appreciates the whole process, and the pipeline is ongoing.
And next day we shall have the first spills.
So, now,
hopefully, yes.
Where are these East African countries? We are seeing East African community growing every year almost. We are now, I think, 8 states now. You have DRC, you have Somalia, you have South Sudan. Those, I think, are the new states that have joined. But when you look at their nature, they're in civil wars.
Honest, yeah.
We're having wars in Congo, we're having wars in Somalia, we're having wars in Sudan, right? And you're adding these unstable countries to relatively stable countries. And these relatively stable countries now, they want to first shift their gear to have a stable, the 3 states to be stable. So it takes, again, it drags the whole process of political federation. You need to first have Somalia, Sudan, and DRC politically and security-wise stable for you to discuss now a political federation. Because you not come to my house and tell me, please come and build a house for the whole community, yet me, it's raining on me. I will not come. You have had issues, ministers in the East African Community Assembly, EAC, raising issues where countries have even failed to bring their contribution. Membership subscription, I think. And when you see these countries that have been pinpointed, there is South Sudan, there is Somalia, there is DRC. And the reason is very clear. The resources they would bring to East African community, they are facilitating their wars. They want to first make themselves stable and peaceful. Therefore, it becomes very hard. I really wish to, in my lifetime, to see a East African Federation. But I have come to agree that I may not see it. Not that I have lost hope.
Interestingly, just allow me to interject. Interestingly, you see, a federation happens on 3 fronts: politically, economically, and socially. And among them, with free movement, free entry and exit, it's very disturbing. I was recently in Congo that you need a visa to enter a fellow East African community. Something that you don't hear in the East African community. So if you've even failed to have free entry and
I don't
exit.
want to miss any of my minutes because I know very short you're going to cut me.
Please.
So while we have all those things, we even have failed the common, having the common market and maybe the business wise. When you look at the sagas, go to DRC. DRC is blaming Rwanda intervening into the affairs of the state. You have had cases of Congo with Uganda in courts of law, and Uganda has to pay some money to DRC. So you cannot convince DRC or Uganda, you cannot convince DRC or Uganda to have visa free because there's still those things that they are not yet cleared.
Let me know.
I won't finish this. So I want to come to this. So what we have, for example, where I come from, That's where the East African community market was supposed to be.
Ntunga.
No, it is in Chotera, Mutukura, where I come from. Even we are neighbors, it is just like here and there. Yes, well, it is just our families are adjacent to the market. Yes, but they came, did everything, but up to now, the market is not yet established. It's established on a paper, but having structures there, it's hard. Why? Because every time they are going to start on a project and it's going to quick start, they will first wait Somalia. They first wait DRC. They first wait South Sudan. Why there's some progress in a pipeline? It's between Uganda and Tanzania, two only. So there's nothing to wait. Who waits the other? It's bilateral. So but now where I bring in the factor before I give back to the microphone, why I bring the factor of whites and why it is very hard for having East African Federation is that all these East African countries are relying on donations and loans from developed countries. And these developed countries, trust me, they are very secure with an organized East African community. Because the moment they are organized, it becomes very problematic for them to again have influence on the resources of East African community. That's why you see the president, as well as people pinpoint him, but at least to some extent I credit him. And I know you have followed the issue of the Sudan, of the other Sudan, not South Sudan, where he says, president says, let's have industrialization in our country. If you want gold, let's refine it from our own country, take it. The issue that is in North Sudan, if you see how the smuggling of gold go to UAE, now UAE is in the whole ruckus. So these countries, they have agents. And who are the agents? They will say, okay, you investor, go and invest in education in Uganda. You go and invest in health in Tanzania. But make sure that your policies about health that you bring in Tanzania, they do not align with policies you bring in education in Uganda to keep the East African integration at a sluggish manner. Because they are really, you cannot, and they are right to be secure. You have Congo, which has almost all the minerals in this world. You have Uganda that now has oil. You have gold in Uganda. You have South Sudan that has oil. You have Kenya with fertile soils and lands and everything. Really, they still want to fetch more of resources from DRC, and so that they have their finances. So it is very hard to have this stuff. It is going to take us a long time. But I would encourage it as young people, we keep having this discussion. The only thing I have is that we quicken to tire. Say that East African must happen to my lifetime. No, please. You may not even see it.
Lay the brick and let other generations.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you. Let me hold you there. My brother Rugambwa, he later, in the first half of the show, you said Cynthia spoke for 15 minutes. You spoke for 18 minutes. And no one interfered with your time. So, my brother Isaac, your thoughts as well on integration, but in relation to the statement of the president.
Thank you, Drake. My position on integration is the same. So I want to regurgitate much of the things that I already made a submission on. What the president said, 12th November, one, people interpreted it in the most ordinary sense. They focused on territorial secession, which position I think is not the right position. When you read, if you've read, or if you've seen the response from the Kenyan government, from Honorable Mudavadi and Songea, they are actually quite succinct on how this should be handled. But Museveni is justified in two ways. One, that in a 67th ordinary session, when the 1982 current UNCLOS first came to life and was being debated, there was much to do with creating a more harmonious trade pattern. And that could not be achieved if, are there around 18 landlocked states? Someone can correct me. If they were not being brought on board.
Yeah.
And that is why, or what formed the purpose of the United Nations, or what under international maritime law is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. And you find that in various articles, specifically 125, 126, 127, 57, 56. All these are talking about transit states, how they work with landlocked states. So when Museveni says, I need the ocean, I have a part of the ocean, he's justified in the legal sense, but not in the territorial acquisition sense, because the International Court of Justice pronounced itself in 2018 when it was deciding between Bolivia and Chile. The same question arose, and they ruled in favor of Chile. That you cannot have a sovereign territorial secession of a part of a country under Article 1, the Montevideo Convention, to now be part of another country, unless we are talking about what happened in 2011 with South Sudan separating with the Northern Sudan, which is quite different. So these pseudo maps that we have been seeing, making a long stretch, I think it is media.
It's a pedestrian talk.
That's more of a sham. But my point is, Museveni is asking a question which every Ugandan should be asking. It's a very, very, very huge question that
every African actually.
Yes, we should be. It's not a question we should run away from. If Article 125 and 126 says that we should have, we have a right. It is a right. If we go to now the interpretation of what amounts to right under the Sarakusa principles, it's another argument. But the fact that peripherally, if we say that I have the right to access, the challenge, and I think what he tried to speak life into, the challenge we have had with Kenya is that they go beyond that. The purpose of that article is to make things easier for these landlocked countries. It is not Uganda alone. Ethiopia did the same. We saw it around 1992 with Djibouti and Eritrea and whatever. And it is still ongoing. For the UNCLOS to come into life and serve its purpose, if we are all signatories to this convention, the thing is Kenya's tariffs are high. That is what the only thing Mzee
is worried about.
They are high and they are going to keep increasing if we do not now stop that problem, which is why we are now trying to opt for Tanzania recently. That's why we only took that, because really from Uganda, Mombasa, it would be easier, but this is a longer route, which we have painfully taken in, meaning that the UNCLOS actually is not helping us in any way. If you say that we have the right and then you want to charge us exorbitantly, and that is maybe why I disagree with Honorable Songia's remarks. The fact that you have a territory does not mean that you have the territorial sovereignty of that territory. But when we under international maritime law, the fact that you accepted, because in the Kenya is part of it, you accepted that, hey, when it comes to this, actually, when you read the Bolivia-Chile case, they will even tell you that if it is a public road in a transit state, but it has been gazetted for the landlocked country, then it should be that. You can't block it in any way. But from the time, look at when we had COVID up to now. And these are the same things that make integration a little bit complicated. Yeah. When you stop my goods from coming into your country today, and tomorrow you expect me, because you see how Kenya suffers with food. There's a time it reaches and Kenya is totally black. The same thing with Tanzania, and it is Uganda that is coming to the rescue. Yes, yes, we get some food from them, but Uganda almost has it all. If we are to be a little bit fair with this conversation. So when you say that I want this, but for me when I want now, you don't want to give me, or you're giving me at a higher price, then the entire idea of the economic integration of East Africa then becomes more of a paper theoretical bit of it, like he has said. You have a common market charter, but physically and in practice, it is a little bit.
Right. Do you remember the issue? Is it 2018 when there was an issue between Uganda and Rwanda because of the border? And all goods that were coming from Mombasa through Uganda to Rwanda, there was, because the borders were closed, they opted Dar es Salaam. Like, we cannot keep in, and that's the question of the president. We can't keep in this.
It's just a sucker, so
you know. So if you are Apili Cynthia or opt Isaac, we can't keep that.
Apili Cynthia solve the problem that is between you two people, and that is why he's coming into the media. Otherwise, you know how Museveni does his thing.
Let me get to you, Cynthia. As well, we have had the thoughts of Godwin and Isaac on the integration question in relation to the statement made by the president. Let's have the same as well from you.
Okay, so I think the most important thing for us as young people is when we complain, we must also address what we can solve within that particular situation. The submissions from the gentleman very much state what limits us from being able to integrate. So I think my biggest push is in terms of the conversations that we have around just integration in itself as young people. We must push ourselves to run away from just miming our problems into actually learning about them and getting to understand what solutions can exist. I was having a conversation, I think, just at the when the whole issue blew up with a Kenyan friend, and the reasoning within the argument in itself is really disturbing, because his argument was to say, well, that's what happens when you're landlocked and a country has sovereignty. It means that we have the power and you must now suffer under that. And you'd clearly understand that this is the generation that is fighting to transition into statehood and into governance in general. So if you have the same ideology, the same mindset, it means that it makes it a tad bit difficult in order for us to move past that and actually have integration. I think we need to start having conversations that educate us around what is important for that integration to happen. But secondly is that legislators within, for instance, EALA, we need to come up with strong policies that condemn bypassing agreed protocols. You have the Common Market Protocol from 2010. You are talking about needing a visa to go to Congo, for instance. In Tanzania, if you don't have an East African passport, your national ID, you must process an interstate pass 2 weeks before travel. And that's the stipulation. Under the Common Market Protocol, there is also, I think, a segment that largely deals with education and how we as an East African region can ratify degrees from different countries. But to date, it will be difficult for you to get a job in Kenya, for instance, with your Ugandan degree in some of these courses because they are not ratified. And those are the things that limit not just free movement, but the capacity for us to create employment across the region, which are some of the crucial factors into stability economically. And I think this also just speaks to the sustenance of democracy in itself. Because I made a statement previously and said, democracies don't thrive with poverty, which is a fact. You need money to run elections. If you look at how much the US, for instance, spends in their elections, you need money to run like the structures within your governance system. People are not going to receive services if you don't have the money. But if you limit the capacity to integrate economically, it becomes a bit challenging to push forward. And I think because normally we are about castigating the president and castigating government, but I think this is one of the most reasonable long-term ideas that is put into the table for us to actually pay attention to. Because we a lot of times say we as young people are excluded from some of the pertinent conversations that define us. However, we have an East African Youth Parliament. And I think just previously, before we had a new speaker at the parliament, we had a Ugandan on there. So it's about time that we now begin to utilize those spaces beyond making them career opportunities for us to fancy and post on LinkedIn. We need to now start utilizing them to educate the masses and push an agenda that defines long-term sustainability for us as young people and for integration to happen. Because in as much as it can be difficult, how can we achieve it? But then I think the last thing that I would say is on the constant additions. Call it reckless, call it pointing to a direction. However, within the push for stability of the additions to the EAC, can there be participation, not just from Uganda as a country that thinks, we need to step into the issue of Somalia, we need to step into the issue of DRC, but from all the East African countries. Because if you listen to Bushanda's submission, Kenya only comes in when they now think Uganda is going to benefit a large portion. So the intent is no longer about creating stability in the region, but it's about creating a first mover advantage for who can economically dominate the other. And I think that is, we need to begin to align our interests as opposed to prioritize one interest over the other, which also can't happen when we are having unrests within the region.
Yeah. All right, Cynthia, just quick, give us your parting shots.
So my parting shots are just to say, as young people, we need to define our agenda by having knowledge about these situations. It's okay to crack a joke here and there. It's okay to meme
But
this,
understand these things
but
as well.
understand exactly. Because if you ask any other young person out there, it actually looks like a territorial struggle. They wouldn't understand the underpinning issues.
And that's a very huge
Yeah,
problem.
and that's a problem. I think we just need to have knowledge.
Godwin, parting shots.
Oh God. I was here, and when these two people were speaking, I remembered how, I don't know how many series you hosted about ECOP.
Sure.
There were quite many. I didn't attend any of them. But
Loyal subscriber.
I
He
saw
watched.
people marching in Parliament. I saw people making the whole ruckus, like demonizing ECOP. Right? But you call them again to come and discuss ECOP. They will not come. It was a project. They succeeded. They no longer have a debate about ECOP. And those are young people. These are our brothers and sisters we stay with, went to school with. And they think that's how the generation will run. It's very absurd. That if we run, because Drake and the viewers trust me, it's not more than 20 years from now we shall be in charge of this East African community. But if we keep with this mentality, I am seeing East African community going off our discussion because we don't know what we want. We have normalized gig economy, killing our own states. So that was just my parting shot is that as a generation, let's not discuss things for only tomorrow. Let's discuss something for 10 years.
Generations.
Generational
Sustainability.
Generational discussions. You will find, I believe in riots, but peaceful riots. I don't at any time. I am one person who was against the Gen Zs in Tanzania, who burnt almost everything. This petrol station is for Godwin, support CCM, you burn it. That is being so, I can't say, that you're not ideological at all. Because now, you can imagine how much the state is going to look for to repair what was destroyed.
At the expense of your own well-being.
Exactly. So we need to go, and I've seen this campaign on media. Now Kenya is reading the whole thing. It's becoming, by the way, I am sorry to say this, but I don't know who is a Gen Z of Kenya. I have failed to understand the definition, but they don't have a direction. And I can debate, even if they're here, I can debate with them. They don't know why they need to destabilize the country. Why should you cross Kenya to go and destabilize Tanzania? For what?
No, I think let's actually be candid on this conversation. There is influence that is coming in from some individuals.
And they don't, and you see the problem that is there, Drake. And for you honest, people don't want to discuss those people behind the influence.
Sure.
They
But
want,
let's sum up.
they want to discuss about Godwin, who is arrested, but don't want to discuss about Isaac, who is funding Godwin to be
Godwin,
arrested.
true.
And they don't know the reason as to why they're funding Godwin to go and do
Exactly.
that demonstration.
We can't keep in this. They don't want to. We cannot keep in this. Those are the people that you call our mentors, but they're draining us for their own benefit.
And yet, in the next 10 years, there will be no more.
Exactly.
And the country is left cheap.
As I end, it is the discussion of the president. It is really a project to ponder about and think about critically. Because
the Indian Ocean is ours.
this is just for good for of us.
Yeah.
When we look in Africa, we have Egypt, Algeria, and I think South Africa, that they are strong in terms of military and security. Why? They have access to the sea. Like, the president is communicating even beyond with all these resources that every time are discovered in our continents, as in our countries, as East African community. Do we have a plan to protect them? We're just on looking. So
Protecting the games.
yeah. So let's really discuss that topic and understand it in its entirety. Let's not just put it to Museveni, President Museveni. It's not about him. It's about us. Thank you.
Isaac, I will stop with you, sir.
Thank you, Drake. My parting shots, I think they have made a better
Closing
parting
remark.
way.
You can as well just say thank you.
Thank you, dear viewers.
But I just want to highlight 2 or 3 things. One, as we discuss East Africa, I want to remind our dear viewers that on 14th October, Kenya signed the Virtual Assets Amendment, Virtual Assets Bill into law, meaning the rate at which the digital economy of Kenya is growing is by far streamlined. And I have seen we have the blockchain summit on the 25th of this month at Sheraton. I would encourage the viewers to also be there. Please do not leave us.
Give us invitation cards.
do not stay behind, because what we have
Such locations say invites only. So
there's no invite only. It is actually the governor Bango Vigari is going to be there. So it's an open space for for anyone who is interested in growing. The last thing I want to make mention of on this show, which I don't think I'll ever have chance to make mention, is as we're debating these things, as we are looking into the growth of East Africa, let's not forget the growth of us individuals on a personal scale. Please do not get tired of consuming information. It is so powerful.
And losing
not,
some.
learning, relearning, and unlearning. Do not let the technology. Our era, in my view, is a technology era. Do not let it slip through your fingers. Through one, like she's saying, through control, but also in more the innovative assess. Because for me as an industrialist, I can tell you, you cannot miss what technology, how much in the 20 to next 30 years Africa is going to develop. If we actually can just have the first data center in Africa, it could revolutionize the entire tech space and drive our economy massively. Even these integrations.
Rhetorical question: is it possible with Congo at war?
Rhetorical
question. You
question.
don't have to answer.
That is off. But I think we cannot stop tech.
We cannot stop tech, but also we need to be alive to the fact that it's very important that we have the Congo question conversation.
It has always been there.
Yes, it has always been there, and I think as we close this conversation,
you want to have a show about Congo? I'm available.
I think it's very important because Congo at the moment possesses the world's minerals that are supposed to push the 4th industrial revolution.
Do you know how the president of Congo came to power?
I know. I definitely know there was agreements that were made.
You do.
I am a young man who reads and understands things.
Very good.
So the question about interests that are in Congo, even you the viewers out there, go and read about the Kitona operation. Something that I think would interest all of you. There are some insights who would say, I think there's a possibility. Don't mention it on
We should
air.
organize a meeting
But
one day. We mediate between the DRC government and yes, what's wrong?
We can actually do
We
that.
really.
We need to understand what is the problem.
Anyway,
You see, Drake,
anyway.
give me just one. Please. You see, Drake, we need to go to the jungles. Not jungles to fight, but jungles as young people to know why.
What is happening?
We stop from consuming the shared information that we don't even the source. Could Congo, government of Congo and Uganda and maybe and other states allow delegations of young people to meet these people and talk to them and understand what is the problem? Because we have our generation that are in M23 that are dying. We have our generation that are in the government of Congo who are soldiers, they are dying. But they don't know why. We need to know why.
They lack the ideological clarity that some of us possibly.
So we should start processing our passport.
But anyway, guys. As I was telling you, as we end this conversation, Congo is a conversation that I think next time we shall have.
Like you
It's a question we need to underpin as young people for us to have peace in the region, because Congo is
and you have to be scared of what is happening in Sudan.
Of course.
True.
Of course, because you see,
like a whirlwind.
In this 21st century and the 4th industrial revolution, Congo stands at the heartbeat of the continent. And it is the key for the prosperity of our generations to come. So if Congo is destabilized, Africa will always be in shambles, because Congo possesses what any other continent doesn't have. And we stand with the opportunity to either be the strongest continent on this world or the weaklings that recent history has. But I think as young people, we're having this conversation, we have possibilities of
Next time
changing
I will
that.
moderate and you debate.
But nonetheless, let's end this conversation. It's been very lovely having you guys. I've loved this conversation. I've always been lively, but I've been more lively. Thanks, Godwin. Thanks, Cynthia. Thanks, Isaac, for this conversation. And to you, our dear esteemed viewers, always continue watching Civic Space TV. This is the Youth Roundtable. My name is Douglas Drake. See you next week, same time, same place. Bye-bye.